Welcome to Omega Coding Development Lessons. We can prove to you that there is nothing difficult in web development and development in general. We will continue learning about the React LIfeCycle methods. For this lesson, we are going to study the shouldUpdate component method. This method works when the props and the state are received, and when we get back the false value, then we can prevent the render to work. Now you should know that the value of the render is true. Also, it will not allow both component.didUpdate and willUpdate to work, which we will talk about them later. During the last lesson, we have used the three LIfeCycle methods, which were component will receive a props, component will mount, and component did mount. We have also made the clock example through the digital clock component using the set interval. So, through the set interval, we have made the state changes every second, and as a result, the render starts working, and the digital clock is called every second. So now, let's learn more about the shouldUpdate method. In order to apply it here, we close the set interval. Okay, now let us open. Now you can see the time is not working anymore. Now here you can notice that the component will mount method has worked from the app.js, and we have the component will mount here has worked from the index.js, the input file, and we can see that the other console logs are working normally. Okay, now let us add the shouldComponent method in the index.js, the input directory. As I already said, that the shouldComponentUpdate method restores the true and the false. We restored the true with the default. Okay, now let's start with the true. Here, we write the next to props. It can also take two arguments. Now, we copy through the console log the next props. Okay, now let us see here. Like in the input, any of them, we write random things. And you can see that the console log of the shouldUpdate copies every next props. So these are the props that we have them in the component, which is the input component that was already called. Here you can see it, it is a 12, and you can notice the tester prop that we have already written. And here it is a 12 as well, and the tester prop again. So if I decided to write something here in the other input, let's suppose, now you can see here 11. Again, here it's 11. The props aren't changing. What's changing then? So, when the component is being rendered again, then at that time the state is changing. And if we want to see the state changing, then we have to copy through the console log again the state. Next, state, and here again state. Now, what's the meaning of shouldComponentUpdate? When you read it, you realize as if it's a question asking you, should or shouldn't I update the component? So, concerning the props and the changing state, I can tell the shouldUpdate whether to continue the LIfeCycle or not. In other words, is it being rendered or not? If I write here, return a true, then it is rendering. While if I write here, render false, the rendering won't happen. Now, as you can see that everything I copy in the render is entered here. Okay, if we write false here, the render will not work. So, in order to understand it better, I write here console log, let's suppose test. Okay, now as you can see here, when we call the component for the first time, the tests are all copied. So we called the component 3 times, and 3 times the render worked with the known text, which is the default value of the name state. Now, if we change here the variable a little, let's suppose we write something like that, you can see that the render is not working. But if we write in the should update here true instead of the false here, and let's suppose we write something different here again, now you can see that it starts rendering and the test is being copied many times. Okay, now let's delete the test here. So when the component is downloaded from the beginning in our application, the should component update will not work. It will only work when any of the state variable is changed or when a new prop is sent. Okay, now let us continue and learn about the component will update. So, the difference between the component will update and the component will mount is that the component will update works when the component is being updated. So the component will update won't work if the component works for the first time. Rather, it works for the second time. In other words, when the value of the variable in the state is changed or new props are received, then at that time the component will update starts to work right before the render. Also, the component will update can get again next props and next state as well. We can copy the props again. Okay, now let me here reinsert the should component update because I deleted it by mistake. Okay, so now let's reload our page and see what's happening. Okay, so now here you can see that the should component update and the component will update work immediately when the state is changed. The component will update copies the next props, and the component should update copies the next state argument. However, unlike the should component update, the component will update can't stop the process of rendering. Now you should know that in the component will update we can't change the value of the state. Now you can see that if we add here, the same value is being added. Okay, now let's move to the other method, which is component did update. Which works immediately after the rendering. And it's quite similar to the component will update, which works from the beginning. However, the component did update works after the render. Okay, now let's use it to show the next props. And you can see the 3 methods are working. We have the should component update, the component will update, and the component did update. Now the console log here shows us each line. Like even if you try to write the component did update before the component will update, it will be still working after the render. Now in the component did update, we try to change the state value. However, we should be careful so that the browser won't be in an endless life cycle. Because if we change the value of the state, then the render won't stop working. It will work endlessly. Every time we call a component's render, the component did update will start working and the browser will be in an endless cycle just because of wrong coding. Now let us study the last method, which is component will unmount. First, let us understand what is the function of the component will unmount. Component will unmount is called when the component is removed from the DOM elements list. So let's write here compo will unmount, and again after the console log you will never see it here unless you remove the component from the DOM elements list. And that's why in the app.js we write a code here in the render. So let's add a new variable, which is v1, let's suppose. And let's not write anything at the moment, let's leave it just as it is. Let us use the ternary operator u after that I insert in the v1 input comp and let's suppose the props test props are 22 and to the v1 we write the word, let's suppose, empty. And now I remove the following components and I call v1. Again, let's not forget to mention the umount here. As a beginning, we write it false. And now here so let's reload our application and see. Now there is nothing here, you can see the empty. Now through the console log again we remove that one. And instead I write button on click in which I mention a new function. Let's suppose this dot and we write f1, we close it here. Also unmount component, and so we change the value of the umount to true, and you can see that our component is here and the button is working. And so we write here the F1 function, which is also an arrow function, in which we change the value of the uMount variable through this set state. I write uMount. So as I said, we change the value to false. Now let us remember the process of the coding that we have done. Okay, first, as we know, we created a new variable in the state, which is the uMount, and then we made the value of it true as a beginning. Then I created the p1 variable in the render. Here it is, the v1, and to which I attributed the component that has to be called. On the contrary, if it was false, then we would write the empty between two tags. And I copied it in the return. After that, I created a click button that when we click it, the component here will be removed from the DOM elements list. Rather, this text empty appears on our application. So I've done all of this through the F1 function, and then I changed the value of the variable in the state, the uMount, and after that the render starts to work. And when the render starts to work, then this code will be disregarded and this text will start working. Finally, this component will disappear from the DOM elements list. Now we try our application here. We can see that everything works properly, but we don't see the console log of the wheel unmount. In order to see it, all you have to do is to click on the unmount component. Here we have it. You can see the empty text, and you can see here the last thing component will unmount appears. So it only worked when we removed the following component from the DOM elements list in the app.js. And in case if you want to remove these parentheses and the true as well, the application will still be working. Okay, let's reload it. You can see it is working properly. That was our lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed it.